Hi, I'm Anne Gaviola. Welcome to the Peak on Global, where we break down what's trending in the business world and what you need to know to stay ahead of the curve. Joining me now is Brett Chang from the Peak podcast. Welcome, Brett.
Hey, Anne, great to be with you as always.
A lovely background. Let's talk about Microsoft's reported $10 billion investment in OpenAI, the maker of Chat GPT. There's buzz this could revolutionize search, which is good news for Microsoft because I have absolutely nothing good to say about their search engine, Bing. What do you think, Brett?
Well, the investment is huge, and it's actually a sign of the times. There's been a shift now in that there was a huge lull in investment over the past year as tech companies kind of figured out how they were going to adapt to the changing economy. And this huge investment shows that there is new life in particularly this AI space. Now, anybody who has tried out the Chat GPT tool, and you can use it for free online, it feels almost magical in that you can write a prompt and it can map out for you a whole story or blog post. It's a huge nightmare for teachers who can really no longer send home essays with kids without kids trying to use this to make it a lot faster to write or to get around even learning about the subject matter. And so it's a pretty magical tool. The technology is super advanced, and Microsoft is hoping that this takes Bing from being a, let's say, third-tier search engine to being a first-tier one, just simply applying this new technology.
Yeah, I've played around with Chat GPT. I did a workshop on it, and I've done things like ask it to write a poem with some pretty surprising results. What we know as well is there's a University of Pennsylvania professor found that Chat GPT was able to pass the final exam for an MBA course at the renowned Wharton School of Business. It actually got a B. This is remarkable, and it's a reminder of what it's already capable of doing, and frankly, it is just getting started. This technology is poised to evolve by leaps and bounds, and we know we have some leaders in the field of AI right here in Canada. One big question is, do we have what it takes to support and in some ways constrain as needed innovation in this field? There are a lot of expert observers telling me that we don't. I think this needs to be really front and center. We're going to end up with a situation like what happened with social media, which basically flourished and became such an influential part of our daily lives. And then the scrutiny from lawmakers came long after the fact. Is this history kind of set to repeat itself, Brett, or could Canada blow its lead?
It's a brave new world out there, and what I think is the most interesting about the rapid development in AI is that a lot of us were raised on this idea that the first people who would be disrupted are more the blue-collar workers, the truck drivers, the tradespeople with advancement in robotics. And what's happening right now is that's being flipped on its head. It's actually more creative professional services folks that are going to be first to be disrupted by these new tools. And that requires a lot of policy to make sure that those people, just like we were expecting that it would be blue-collar people to help the higher leverage, higher value service folks to have a smoother landing. And I don't think we have that policy in place yet. And as this technology gets more and more advanced and it actually begins to affect employment patterns, so you start to see mass layoffs because there are now computers that can do the jobs better than people, that's going to have a really, really big impact on the economy. And that's probably what I'm most concerned about, which is how do we provide new opportunities for people who are disrupted by this technology? How do we make sure that they can still live fulfilling and successful lives, even if they no longer can do the jobs that they thought they could do? And it's not just simple secretary work. It could be legal work. It could be low-end software development. There's a number of different fields that are at risk right now. And when you see something like a Chat GPT begin to get a B on a Wharton School of Business test, it really does put that in perspective. And it shows that we're a lot closer to that than we first thought. And that requires, like you said, a lot of policy shifts to make sure that we can accommodate for all these changes.
Right. Okay. So this next story, this is the second topic. It's pretty fascinating too. Canada's privacy watchdog found that Home Depot failed to obtain consent from customers whose information was being shared with Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram. That happened for years. In a report released this week, Home Depot was found to have shared details on customers' e-receipts with Meta. As you know, Brett, e-receipts are often offered as a kind of way to cut back on paper waste, so think of the environment. Little did people know information about their purchases, which can be personal. It can reveal things like your sexual preference or some health information that was being handed over to Meta. Home Depot said it had obtained implied consent because the details are somewhere on its website. It also said it didn't want to induce consent fatigue, asking people too often if they're still okay with doing this. And the privacy commissioner said that's not a good excuse. Brett.
We're talking about the Chat GPT and AI. I think we've already passed that brave new world when it comes to data privacy. The world is so interconnected now with the internet and all the different platforms that function on it, which range from, of course, big social networks like Meta, but also your average and local hardware store is now also playing a big role when it comes to the collection and distribution of your data. And so what happened with Home Depot and Meta, I think happens a lot more than people think, which is that these systems are now interconnected. They were taking your email address for that e-receipt, and they were trying to determine whether or not that you might have gone to Home Depot through an ad that you saw on Instagram. And the only way that they could do that is by sharing that data with Meta. And because we don't have really robust and comprehensive data privacy laws, there's a lot of ambiguity around what's accepted and what's not. And only in hindsight, after investigation by organizations and institutions like the privacy watchdog, do we actually get a better sense of what is allowed and what's not. And that gives companies a lot of flexibility when it comes to considering where this data should go and who should be holding on to it. It's becoming a really big problem. It's going to become an increasingly big problem as we become even more connected and then start to include AI in all these different applications.
Yeah, and I'm going to riff on that in a second. And just remember, this happened for years. We found out about it after the fact because someone noticed something. This was a user, and then they filed a complaint and they raised a red flag. My question is, why don't people care more about guarding their personal data? Once upon a time, the argument I heard was that no company has the bandwidth or resources to sort through all your personal information and do much with it. And as you mentioned, I think that when AI enters the picture, it becomes pretty clear that your personal information can be used to paint a pretty good picture of you, especially if you cross-reference that against your activity on social media, right, Brett?
Absolutely. I can't speak for everyone, but me personally, I've effectively given up on protecting my data privacy.
Really?
There have been so many security incidences that have happened where a lot of my information, whether it be my email or my date of birth, has been stolen, that I just feel helpless. There's really not much I can do. I obviously want to keep my payment information protected, and I try to use advanced passwords and keep a password manager, but a lot of my information is already out there in the open, and so I just don't know what else I can do to stop that, especially when you really can't participate in the internet ecosystem and in all these different internet businesses that provide you so much value unless you give them that data. And we just don't have a proper regulatory framework that's there to protect me. And so I'm not sure what else I can do. And so I think, like a lot of people, there's just a sense of helplessness. And there's also not clear direction as to what else we can do to keep our data more safe, especially when it's in the hands of these big corporations. And in many cases, they're the ones who are being hacked.
Absolutely, and I do hope that policymakers start to craft some meaningful regulation around this. I do think and hope that maybe we're one app away from solving that issue, Brett. Okay, let's talk about this third topic. Donald Trump is free to return to Meta's social media platforms because of the 2-year ban that kicked him off. That's expired. Meta says it has new things in place to ensure repeat offenders don't keep flaunting the rules. And all of this timing is important ahead of the 2024 U.S. presidential race. I have 2 questions for you. Haven't we seen this movie before? And also, is it different and does it matter this time around?
Well, those are 2 good questions, and I'm not sure how well I can answer either of them. But I'll say the first one, Trump, we still have to wait to see whether former President Donald Trump actually even uses these platforms. He made a big, grand initiative to start his own platform called Truth Social, and up until this point, that's effectively been the only social media channel that he's been using. Now, he does do interviews with different influencers and podcasters and social media channels, but those are distributed on their accounts and not on his. And so we've yet to see him, for example, he is back on Twitter, and we have yet to see him actually tweet anything. And so we'll have to see what happens, but it's really tough to say what's going to happen next. Is there going to be another January 6th type event that we'll have to see how Facebook responds to that and what they do with Donald Trump if that is the case? We saw something just a few weeks ago where Jair Bolsonaro, the former president of Brazil, led a very similar January 6th style event in Brasilia, in their capital. And you saw effectively the same thing from the social media platforms. Little moderation here and there, but he was allowed to continue on the platforms and spread whatever messages that he wanted. And so it's really tough to say what future behavior will look like. But, there definitely is no law, if that's what we're looking for, to stop them from doing or spreading any type of disinformation.
We have to leave it there, Brett. Thank you, as always, for your time and your insight.
Thanks, Anne.
And you can get all your daily business news with the Peak Daily Podcast. It is available for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you find your favorite podcasts.